Arrow has recently ended after 8 seasons, and one thing that each one of those seasons had was a final episode, otherwise known as a season finale, the episode that everything leads up to, the episode that maybe sets up the next season, and the episode that is typically one of the best or sometimes one of the worst episodes of that season. With that in mind, in this video I wanted to rank all 8 season finales of Arrow, each from one season from worst to best, and that's what I'll do in this episode, in this video. So with that in mind, let's begin.
Even if you stop me, those missiles are finding their targets.
It won't just be me who's gonna stop you.
You brought friends. So did I.
With Season 4 being the worst season of Arrow, naturally the season finale would be the worst season finale, and I don't think this episode is the worst episode of the season, but I do think that it is the lowest rated episode of the show ever, for a very good reason, and that's because the season was going so poorly that once the conclusion came around, and it fell so flat, they couldn't, obviously it wouldn't end up being anything other than the lowest rated episode of the show, as I think it deserves to be. But this episode has a very bad main villain rivalry between Oliver Queen and Damien Darhk. The fight scenes are terrible. There's this one fight scene where the ending one where Damien Darhk and Oliver just take turns punching each other, and it's so boring. The cliffhanger ending is terrible. The flashbacks are terrible. This episode has a lot of Felicity. It focuses on her quite a bit, making this, I think, the worst season finale of Arrow, which is fitting because it's from the worst season.
Meet you guys, even if he doesn't think so.
No.
Your name is outside history.
My name is Oliver Queen.
The Season 3 finale is actually up there as one of the worst episodes of Season 3. The main villain rivalry between Oliver and Ra's al Ghul is decent in the season, but I think in this episode it's not very good, especially in the fight scenes when they are fighting in the final fight. They're wearing the exact same dark clothing at night, the dark costumes, and you can't really tell who is who, making it a fairly terrible final fight scene. The cliffhanger at the end with Oliver and Felicity driving off into the sunset is cringy and doesn't make me excited for the next season whatsoever, and it didn't originally. The flashbacks are very, very mediocre. There's a lot of cringy moments, and while there's also some good moments, like the title of the episode, My Name's Oliver Queen, that moment is actually very, very good. For the most part, it is definitely not a good episode and a fairly mediocre season finale.
Go. I do now.
I've been waiting for you.
Instead of finding the hero that is inside of you, you went down a dark path. If you're gonna kill me, do it.
The second half of Season 7 was nowhere near as good as the first half or so, and if we were including the season finale to the first 7 episodes, which was the Slapside Redemption, it would be very, very hard on this list. I'm not counting it because it's not a season finale. It's never been called a season finale, but the actual season finale of Season 7 is nowhere near one of the better ones. In fact, it's in the lower half. This episode has a very, very bad rivalry between the main hero and the main villain, which is Oliver Queen and Amiko Queen, as Amiko is she's not a physical threat. She's not a very good character. The actress is not very good in the role, so the rivalry just doesn't hold up whatsoever. The fight scenes are good, and the conclusion is decent enough, but for the most part, especially with the flash forwards and the final confrontation between Oliver and the main villain, it's just not very good. Thankfully, though, there's a lot of Team Arrow team-ups with a lot of different heroes, which is really cool, and the cliffhanger ending with the Monitor recruiting Oliver is definitely very, very exciting, which saves it from being even lower on the list.
Easy.
This is my city.
There's enough explosives in here to send us into orbit.
You got 5 seconds. 5. Move. 4.
It's a trap.
3.
I'm gonna kill you.
2. 1.
Season 6 was like the opposite to Season 7, where it started poorly, but then maybe got a little bit better after there was the main villain switch. This time around, it was Ricardo Diaz, who in this season finale had a decent enough main hero / main villain rivalry with Oliver. I think that the final fight was pretty good, the final conclusion to the storyline, which it wasn't really concluded yet, because it led into Season 7. Before this season, it definitely was not bad. And there were things like Quentin Lance's death being very emotional, Oliver's identity reveal being intriguing and exciting, and him being imprisoned with that cliffhanger ending also being very, very well done. For the most part, I think that while it's definitely not one of the best season finales, it's also a lot better than the ones we've gone over so far.
This universe is far bigger. 'Cause, than any of us. Oliver's mission is far from over.
The final episode of Arrow ever, the season finale of Season 8, the 170th episode, and the series finale of the show, is a very, very good episode. It has probably the greatest fight scene from the show ever, with this single-take fight scene where Oliver is mowing down an entire army of people during the Season 1 flashbacks, or the Season 1 flashbacks to Season 1. It's so good, and honestly, that single fight scene gives this series finale a lot of points. Other things like the conclusion to the show being very good. For the most part, that is. John becoming Green Lantern being extremely exciting, and I think a great conclusion to that storyline. And while this episode has some illicity, which I don't love, I mean, if like in the past, I looked into this episode, knew what was going to happen, I would have been very disappointed. However, I don't think watching the episode I was that disappointed, so I definitely think it is one of the better season finales of Arrow.
I'm done playing your games. You are done. When I say you're done.
The season finale of Season 2 was a very good conclusion to an otherwise pretty awesome season, where the main hero rivalry between Oliver and Slade was absolutely amazing. The final fight scene between Oliver and Slade also absolutely amazing, especially with how it flip-flops between the present day and the flashbacks, or in the flashbacks, Oliver is fighting Slade as well. The flashbacks in Season 2 were maybe the best flashbacks ever, like maybe on par with the present day storyline of the season, and that is also true in this very episode. The conclusion of this season is very good, and while this episode does have some illicity that I really do not like, I don't think that takes away from the episode that much, and it is definitely one of the best episodes of the show, and also one of the best season finales.
He's willing to sacrifice for the people of the city. Makes him kind of a hero.
Are you ready to die?
So this episode is one of the 2 season finales of Arrow that made it into the top 10 episodes, or at least in my opinion. Like, I think everything below this, like Unthinkable and Fade Out, and even Life Sentence, maybe would make it into the top 20 probably. I mean, they definitely would. But these 2, Sacrifice and the next episode, were in the top 10. This episode specifically, I think, has an amazing main hero / main villain rivalry that is maybe not as good as the one between Oliver and Slade, but definitely is very good. With the final fight and the final conclusion of the season and the season-long storyline being handled very well. I think this episode has like some of the best acting in the show ever, specifically from John Barrowman with that scene where he says they deserve to die. It's one of the best scenes of the show ever. The music in this episode is amazing. The flashbacks are very good. And another one of the best scenes in the show ever is Tommy Merlin's death scene, which is incredibly emotional. Topped off on that is the great cliffhanger with the Glades being in ruins, making it, I think, one of the best episodes of the show ever, and the second best season finale.
Hello, Oliver. If you want to get your son back, you know what you have to do. I have no interest in this being a fair fight.
And the highest rated episode of the show ever on IMDb deserves to be considered the very best season finale, and probably, or one of at least, the best episodes for so many reasons. The season-long storyline of the season was amazing, and the fact that they capped it off so perfectly, they concluded it so well, is one of the main reasons why it is so beloved as an episode. The main hero rivalry between Oliver and Adrian is incredible. In my opinion, the best rivalry on the show ever, and again, they handle that conclusion to that rivalry so well, with the fight scenes and the fight scene flip-flopping between Oliver fighting Adrian and then also Oliver fighting Konstantin Kovar in the flashbacks, like Season 2, being very exciting, and it just handled very well. Speaking of the flashbacks, it has some great scenes, specifically the ending flashback scene, which expands on the pilot episode where after Oliver is picked up by the boat, he calls Moira in one of the most emotional scenes of the show ever. ever, which leads into one of the best and most intense scenes of the show ever, as we have the death of Adrian Chase and the Lian Yu explosion, something that blew my mind and blew up Lian Yu the first time I saw it. And while the very next episode completely ruined that cliffhanger as it did nothing with it, that is not at the fault of this episode, as it is one of the best episodes of the show ever. Some things I didn't mention are Deathstroke, he's awesome, and the redemption they give him in this episode is really, really cool. Malcolm Merlin's death is handled very well. The team up between all these different characters fighting Adrian Chase's team also is just very, very exciting. And overall, I think it is the best season finale of Arrow ever, and I would say deserves to be the highest rated of the show ever. But if you saw my top 10 episodes, you would know that there's one episode I do like more. So anyway, that is it for this video. Let me know your thoughts on my list, but also your own list in the comments down below. Like, what's your least favorite and what's your favorite season finale of Arrow? Also, let me know what Arrow ranking would you want me to do next? Like maybe season premieres, mid-season finales, maybe season finale cliffhangers, things like that. And if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching.